For the last few weeks, I've been living here in Australia. I think living full-time on a camper van is pretty draining. You get pretty tired because it takes a lot of time to do and undo the basic stuff that you don't even think about when you are on a normal apartment or on a normal house environment. The thing here, either in a camper van or a four-wheel drive, that you have to set up and you have to pack up all the time whenever you want to, for example, cook. So if you're cooking, if you want to have breakfast, then you have to do the whole thing, take out the kitchen. It adds a bit of friction in every step of the things that you want to do. So at the end of the day, everything takes longer. And it also depends on the setup that you have. So for example, back in the day when I used to have a four-wheel drive, I didn't have as much of a nice setup as I have here. And you have to move everything. Like there's some camper vans or four-wheel drive setups that you really need to move everything inside, like a Lego or a Tetris, to be able to access other things. So it's very hard because you move this box and you grab this other thing and just to, for example, get some coffee done. So all this stuff gets really tiring after a while. It is really exciting at the beginning, but if you're doing it every day for weeks or months, then you start to realize how much time you waste doing all that in breakfast, lunch, dinner. So you have two options. You either done it well, you're eating like shit, or you're doing quick stuff that doesn't require much preparation. So a lot of people end up doing sandwiches or wraps or things like this, which I also do, and cooking things that get done really quickly, that you can cook really quickly, things that don't require a lot of water, because water is a scarce resource when you are doing this lifestyle. You usually have a few 10-liter bottles that you accumulate with you, like at least one or two, and then that's what you use to do the whole thing, even to drink and also to cook. So, for example, boiling pasta requires a lot of water, so then you end up choosing other things. Or some people, if you know that you can refill the water every day, then you don't need to worry about that too much, but it is still something to consider. Then also to sleep, there's two options. The bed already built up inside like I have here, or that you have the bed on top of the car and then you have to build up the whole tent. Or, you can also go with a tent on the outside. But most people, they either have the bed inside in a camper van or a four-wheel drive with a bed or a car with a bed. So it's either van with a bed, car with a bed, or then you have the tent on the top of the car. And that takes like 2-3 minutes to set up, 2-3 minutes to pack up. But you see, this is another of the things that adds some friction to the whole experience, which is an experience in itself. But once you're doing it for very long, you start to get tired of these small little things. So you have to try to reduce the amount of things that you have to do the things that you need to survive, the daily things, to eat, to sleep, and then finding a setup that you feel comfortable with. It is life-changing. For example, I ended up buying this van because it was fairly big. It was fairly spacious. I will try to, it's pretty big. I can sit on top of the bed and my head barely touches, so I can sit comfortably. But I have lots of friends that they have cars and camper vans where you cannot even sit. So it is really uncomfortable. Then you also have to think about that. Then also in terms of food, having a fridge changes the whole thing, the whole game. There's different options for food. The lowest budget option is to have an Esky, which is like a box pretty much. And then you put ice inside, ice that you buy in the petrol station. And then you put the other food there and it keeps it cold. It is not the best option at all. In my opinion, it's the worst, but it is at the same time the cheapest to do at the beginning, because these kind of boxes, these Eskys, are pretty cheap. And then you just buy ice bags. So they cost, I don't know, $4, $5, $6 each. But then they melt and everything is full of water. And then the food is like on the water kind of thing. So it is a bit of a mess. So you have to bring all the food perfectly sealed to avoid food getting ruined by water. This is the first option. Then the second option, which is the best one, is to have a fridge that is powered with some kind of 12-volt system. And there's a few different ones. Most people, they go with a second battery. So you have a second battery in the car. You have the car battery, which is the first one, the main one. And then you connect a second battery. And then the fridge is using the electricity from there. This is really good because most of these systems are built in a way that the second battery charges when the car is running. So when the car is running, the alternator is charging the first battery and also it charges the second battery at the same time. So if you're driving, the whole electrical system gets charged. Then the fridge is also running at the same time. And then when you stop the car, the second battery has electricity stored and then it can keep running. This system works as long as you don't stay for more than 2 or 3 days stopped without driving. And obviously it depends on the system because you can have a second battery that is bigger or smaller. They are usually about 500 Ah, which means amperes hour. And these fridges, if you buy like a King's one, then like the one that I have, they don't consume much. So they run for a very long time, but still like it usually gives you 2 or 3 days of enough power to run the fridge. It also will depend on the temperature of the outside and the temperature of the van. Because why does it matter? If the van gets really hot or the car gets really hot, then the fridge environment is really hot and the heat tries to get inside the fridge. So then the fridge has to work more to try to make it colder and cooler. And that requires more electricity because it's running more time. So then it means that the battery will last less than if you are in a colder area. So for example, if you are in Tasmania or in the south part of Australia, which is much colder usually, the fridges and the whole electrical system would be able to run for much longer than if you are traveling in the north in the humid and hot times of the year. So that is important as well to consider. If it is really, really hot, maybe the electrical system will not last a full 2 or 3 days. Maybe it will last 1 or 1.5 days without you driving and recharging it. This is in case you don't have solar panels, because the second option, apart from being connected to the alternator and to the main battery, is that the second battery is connected to solar panels on the roof, which I do not have. And I do not think that they are essential and extremely necessary. If you're doing some kind of road trip adventures, you don't really need solar panels. You can just get away with this system that I talked about, which is a bit cheaper and easier to set up than if you do the whole roof panel setup, because you will need roof racks, you will need the solar panels, which are much more expensive. Usually people do both. So then you have 2 ways of charging the batteries. When you're driving and also the sun is charging the batteries as well. So if you have that set up, then it's pretty much unlimited power and the fridge will run forever. You also have to consider that if you have different things, like for example lights like I have, or I have charging ports, then that adds extra pressure to the system and to the workload. So that will reduce the amount of time. So yeah, in my opinion, if your vehicle is able to cover sleep and eat, that's the 2 main concerns that you have really when you are traveling around Australia, because they are connected with safety and being comfortable as well, but essentially safety. If you don't have a place to sleep, if you have experienced that feeling of like getting one day and not having booked a hostel and then everything is fully booked and only extremely expensive hotels are available, that feeling is shit, it's horrible. So like having the safety of a place to sleep, it really changes everything. And then also the ability to cook. So also it is really good that you install some kind of cooking system with camping gas in your vehicle, so you are also able to cook some stuff. By having all this, you are going to be pretty much set up for an adventure, eat and sleep. The rest are some nice extras that you might or might not have, but that they don't add to the survival ability of the experience. I will do some future videos about showing the setup that I have here, showing the electrical system, how I did it, showing the back of the car, and also when I find other backpackers that have other setups, I will try to record them as well and bring them to you, because it is always good to see all the different options so you get more inspiration, and then you are like, oh, maybe I like this more or I like that more. So then you can either go for one specific type of vehicle or setup, or you can build your own. But none of these really matter if you are not able to extend your visa and get extra years, get the peace of mind. So watch this video next, where I explain the different areas where you can go and work to extend and get your 88 days out of the way as quickly and easily as possible.